Minister James Heappey, thank you for talking to JoyNews. You are in Accra, joining your counterparts and a host of other diplomats for the United Nations Peacekeeping Ministerial. This is a summit that many experts have described as an opportune moment for the world to once again make a statement for that need for a peaceful international order. And it's simply because of, you know, the spectacle of what's happening in the Middle East, and some were hearing on the African continent about, you know, wars, coup d'etats, you know. And so let me just start off from what's happening in the Middle East. It will be a good opportunity to take your thoughts on the Israeli-Palestinian tension. You obviously have been an advocate for peace, looking at what you've done in Ukraine, for instance. You've been there and made a passionate appeal for the world to embrace peace. What's your impression of what's happening in the Middle East?
Well, look, I think that it is deeply tragic what we're seeing on our TV screens every day, images of enormous misery and human suffering. And I also think that it is extraordinary that the debate has become so polarizing around the West and beyond, in such a way that sort of forgets quite deliberately how all of this started. I mean, you know, Hamas chose to raid into Israel and commit the biggest murder of Jews since the last days of the Holocaust. Now that is a grotesque thing, and Israel's right to mount a military offensive against Hamas to ensure that that cannot happen again, and Israel's right to recover its hostages, I think is absolute. But at the same time, there is a population, a civilian population in Gaza, who were oppressed and brutalized by Hamas and are now suffering enormously as a consequence of the military action that is happening there. And so I think that people like me, who recognize absolutely Israel's right to defend itself and Israel's right to defeat Hamas as a military entity, also have to have regard for how we alleviate the suffering of the Palestinians in Gaza. And that's why the UK is working hard to facilitate aid deliveries into Gaza. It's why we're constantly reminding Israel of its responsibilities to act with precision and with restraint, so that it prosecutes legitimate military targets but seeks to minimize the amount of civilian casualties that are incurred. And most of all, to encourage that all of this is done as quickly and as precisely as possible, so that we can then get on with rebuilding a peace and stability.
But that has been a challenge. The world was happy when, of course, through the same multilateral United Nations arrangement and the Security Council level, we're able to secure some ceasefire. Now we're going back to a militarized regime. The call for demilitarization of the region hasn't worked. What do you feel is accounting for this?
Well, look, I mean, what's accounting for it is that there is an organization in Hamas that will not accept the existence of the Israeli state, has routinely made its genocidal views towards the Jewish people clear, and Hamas has chosen, at odds with everything else that's going on in the region, where country after country has been seeking to improve its relationships with Israel, Hamas has remained determined to destroy Israel. Now, I hate that that is the reality, but I also hate that there is so much debate that seeks to try to normalize what Hamas has done. What they did was despicable. It was barbaric. It was utterly inexcusable. And you know, my hope is that once this is done, that we can quickly get on with finding a two-state solution that allows Palestinians and Israelis to live peacefully alongside each other, that our partners in the region will work with the UK, the US and others to facilitate that, and that we can find a just and lasting peace.
And just to close the chapter on this, the United Kingdom has also faced its own challenges or criticisms surrounding how this conflict is polarizing the world. Do you accept the criticism, the fact that the West has turned a blind eye to the humanitarian crisis in the Middle East, and the fact that you need to speak to the Israeli government to try as much as possible to convince them to cease fire?
No, I think the last word was the issue there. As I've said in the answer to the first two questions, I think absolutely the UK has a responsibility, and one that it is taking, to speak to the Israelis, remind them of their obligations under international law, to encourage that they are precise and they only do what is necessary to achieve their legitimate military aims. I think that it is right that the delivery of aid into Gaza is given the opportunity to be delivered, and thus there are humanitarian pauses in the conflict. But the UK has not called for a ceasefire, because that would be to deny Israel its right to pursue these legitimate and necessary military aims that it has, and to recover their hostages.
Let's look at what's happening in the West Africa sub-region, because just being fixated on the Middle East will make it look as though we're safe and secure. There are developments happening in the sub-region which, of course, are of worry to many residents in this part of the world, and that's feeding into the reason why many see the opportunity in this UN peacekeeping ministerial. The United Nations, of course, through the Security Council again, pulled out that peace agreement in Mali. And Mali, of course, we know the trajectory, military dictatorship, and it's been, a spillover effect ever since. Niger has followed, Guinea-Bissau, and of course, many threats, the latest being Sierra Leone. It's as though the entire West Africa sub-region is experiencing some threats, I believe.
Definitely. And there's, I think one of the really important things that those of us in Europe, North America, need to remind ourselves is that, yes, what's happening in Ukraine immediately focuses European attentions. The growing competition with China similarly focuses the mind, and Iran remains a concern. And so people talk in the West about this return to kind of state-on-state competition, as if we've kind of completed the age of counter-terrorism, counter-insurgency, and whatever else. The reality is that organizations like Al-Qaeda and Islamic State are alive and well and are growing in their ability to threaten the Western interest, the interest of our allies and partners across Africa. And in the Sahel, we have seen the amount of violence increase and move southwards over the last 2 or 3 years. And that's why the UK and many other countries are seeking to work with Ghana and other partners in the region to develop military capability. What was really interesting about the summit that I thought Ghana so brilliantly hosted here in Accra over the last few days is there is some very earnest discussion about how UN peacekeeping needs to evolve in order to meet the reality of the threat today. If there's not a peace to keep, you can't peacekeep. And so, what is the relationship between the UN and regional solutions like the Accra Initiative? And that was a really, really interesting and necessary conversation driven by countries like Ghana, who feel so acutely the need to get those initiatives and the UN support working properly in concert.
And also, this summit is providing you with the opportunity to also experience firsthand the work going on as far as the UK Ghana Security Partnership is concerned, which obviously will provide that platform for us to safeguard Ghana's democracy, because Ghana's democracy, because it has been described as a beacon of the African continent, and what's happening across the sub-region might threaten what's happening here in Ghana. First of all, what's your diagnosis of the challenge? Wagner has been mentioned. Other extremist elements that you're pointing out have been mentioned. What's your own diagnosis of where the challenge is coming from, just before we zoom into it?
Well, the macro threat is a threat of climate change, desertification, poverty, grievance that often exacerbated by local rivalries and tensions and internal dispute within countries, that creates an environment within which organizations like Islamic State and Al-Qaeda can grow, and sort of they attract people to them because they can kind of they deal with that grievance. That's what they're so effective at doing. The growth of that violence is clearly, it's gone from something that existed in the central belt of Mali to something that now exists in Burkina and Niger, and that is now on the northern borders of Côte d'Ivoire, Ghana, Togo, Benin. It's been a concern of the UK's when it was still well up north in the Sahel itself. But the more it moves south, the more that our friends, like Ghana, are seeking our support in how they will tackle this. And the UK has a very strong bilateral security relationship with Ghana. Our armed forces work together a lot, and the more that friendship develops, the more that we're doing together to tackle threats that we share in this region. The UK has a strong interest here. Ghana clearly has its very obvious national interest in resolving this, and so there's an opportunity to work together in support of Ghana's plans.
So what benefits are we likely to get from this UK-Ghana security partnership?
Well, I'd like to hope that there's already been some pretty significant benefits. The UK Army has been working with the Ghanaian Army for many years. Ghanaian Army and Navy officers are routinely educated in the UK at our military academies and staff colleges. And our militaries have incredibly close institutional links. Now, over the last few years, what we've been able to do is to start developing that relationship to be more tailored towards the threat that Ghana faces, on land and at sea. And everything from the low-level tactical training that's needed to successfully prosecute counterinsurgency and counter-terrorism missions. We've been training in that. We've been doing work with your bomb disposal, your counter-IED teams in order to develop their capabilities. We're increasingly working with some of your regiments to create more specialist commando-type capabilities that will be of direct relevance to the fight that is necessary in the north of your country. We're supporting the Ghanaian-led regional initiative, the Accra Initiative, which is an opportunity for the 4 coastal countries alongside Niger, Burkina and Mali to work together to tackle insecurity in the Sahel, supporting Ghana and its leadership in that initiative, encouraging other nations around the world to join as a donor community to support as well. So look, we're doing lots. Ghana, I think, benefits enormously. There's the appetite to do plenty more.
And speaking of the Accra Initiative, I recall meeting you at that summit where, of course, Accra hosted once more all of the actors and partners to that initiative. There's a criticism facing that because, yes, Ghana is huge on a homegrown solution towards, the security challenges the West Africa sub-region is facing, except that the argument is we're not as sophisticated, or we do not have the capacity to carry it all out. Is the UK government willing to support?
We are supporting, but what we're supporting is Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, Togo, Benin, so too are other donors as well. If what you're asking is, are we willing to do it ourselves? No, absolutely not. Because that is, we can't ignore what's happened over the last 25 years in Iraq, in Afghanistan, for the French in Mali. What we've seen is that the presence of Western troops catalyzes the violence. It inspires the jihadists, and the zeitgeist at the moment is for these regional solutions to regional problems. This is the strength of the Accra Initiative, is that it's not a French idea, it's not a British idea, it's not an American idea, it's a West African idea, and it's your plan, your initiative. We, as your close friends, are seeking to rally a donor community around you to support your initiative. But in no way will we seek to tell you what you must do, and in no way will we seek to do it for you, because that's just not the way to do things nowadays.
But how about a different perspective to that? The feeling that, the UK is simply abandoning your allies when they need the help the most. I mean, all of these coastal states have been looking elsewhere for support, for security, border control, and to fight violent extremism.
So we're demonstrably not abandoning our allies. The list of things that the UK is doing with Ghana and other partners in the region is very lengthy and has real value. Your president is engaged in this process. It was his initiative, and he's been very grateful for the support that we've been offering. Your ministers, your senior military, all recognise the value and are also very clear that they do not want UK troops based here in Ghana doing the fight. When I spoke to you last, there was a news story breaking because we were moving troops out of Mali, right, and there was a sort of rumour set running that we were going to bring them here. Utter nonsense. That was never, ever, ever the plan. Right. But it just goes to show that what we're having to do, what we're trying to do, is to support you in your solution, not trying to come here and do it ourselves, because that denies that Ghana is a stable, secure, strong country in its region with a very professional, courageous, dedicated military. You're capable of doing this and leading your region in its response to this violence. And we, as your friends and partners, are hugely proud to stand behind you and support you in that endeavour. But definitely not do we want to come here and do it for you. I think we'd make the situation worse. And frankly, you're much better placed to do it.
I would say we're desperate, for the want of better words, at this time where, of course, we're transitioning into a political season. Our 2024 general elections is just around the corner. But developments, for instance, in Sierra Leone, another attempted coup d'etat, is simply raising up this issue as to how we can consolidate democracy in the West African side.
Well, I mean, and the key there, and the thing that I think that Ghana particularly does well, is it's about that sense of a state that is looking after all within its borders, that is secure, that is stable, that is reaching out to all. Because if you remember earlier on in our conversation, you asked me about threat, and I sort of started with the macro threat, about the things that caused the grievance and the alienation, and that's what the insurgents so successfully tap into. And so the best way to respond to the threats in this region, the instability in this region, is to kind of really reinforce the strength of governance within the country's borders so that the grievance never comes. Now that requires more than military endeavour, which is why actually, I'm speaking as Defence Minister, I focused on the military, but the wider UK governmental effort in support of Ghana extends much more widely. The threat is clear. huge amounts of disinformation within the region, often fanned by the Russians to try and undermine the Western interest. It takes hold. It's got a really strong kind of post-colonial, anti-colonial flavour to it that resonates. And we have to be really careful, therefore, to make sure that we don't come across as trying to tell you what to do. We don't come across as trying to kind of throw our weight around. We just act as a partner supporting your plans, supporting you to be strong within your borders. And that's the way this trend of coups and the spread of the violence, through supporting you.
Unfortunately, we don't have all of the time, so let's round off our conversation by talking about, for instance, what's happening within the UK itself, because Ghanaians are equally interested, your immigration policies, and the latest being the deal signed with Rwanda, for instance. There's a security dimension to it, because many, for years now, have seen the UK as a land of opportunities. I mean, that's the fact. Some, looking at our immigration trends, people have moved into the UK just to take advantage of the economic opportunities there. But looking at what's happening now, are we not bringing back home a youthful population, a very significant number that could, if care is not taken, could turn around to become Africa or West Africa's security challenge?
Well, look, there's a number of bits there, but let me start with the UK bit first, and the important distinction between legal and illegal migration. Right. Now, the amount of legal migration into the UK should be controlled and should unapologetically be focused on the needs of the UK economy, and therefore we should set requirements for those who come to the UK that they come with qualifications and skills that we need. It's not an automatic right for anybody able to come to the UK. Now, you're absolutely right. There is a fantastic Ghanaian diaspora in the UK that contributes enormously to our society. And that is an example of how open and welcoming the UK is and how we've benefited from all of that migration, but legal migration in a way that benefits the UK. The thing that is causing the grievance and that millions of British people feel is deeply unfair is that hundreds of thousands of people try to come to the UK illegally. Tens of thousands have succeeded, and that when they come, they put pressure on our public services, they put pressure on the availability of housing, and people don't think that's fair. They shouldn't be able to enter illegally. They shouldn't be able to cost the UK state the amount that they are. And so the solution that we seek through our deal with Rwanda is that Rwanda, as a safe country in whom we have enormous trust, is willing to allow us to move some of these illegal migrants to Rwanda. And that will, I think, act as a deterrent to those who are in France, a safe country, who are trying to cross illegally into the United Kingdom. So, look, it is a hugely politically sensitive issue back home at the moment. But the UK, I think, has every right to seek to secure its borders, to seek to stop this insidious trade in illegal people trafficking, moving people spending their life savings to cross the channel. And the fact that we have this deal with Rwanda, which I think, when in action, will become a real deterrent for those who might seek to cross thereafter, is the route that the government is pursuing.
Minister James Heappey, thank you.
Thank you very much, Annie. Thank you.